And we are now into video 6, looking at all of the other panels within After Effects. And so we've looked at our project panel, we've looked at our timeline panel, we've looked at our composition panel, and if you notice, there are quite a few other panels uh, around the application window that we're going to be looking at now. So the first one I'm going to jump up to is our tools panel, our tools palette. So whenever I start a composition, these icons will become visible or able to select. And we're going to look at them in groups. So the first group we're going to look at our selection group. And within this group, our selection tools, we're going to look at the first one, which is our selection tool. And with this tool, you're going to use this most frequently. This is the one I actually have currently selected. This is just the basic arrow, but this allows me to go in through and select different things. So if I wanted to close this folder, open it up, maybe grab this layer, drag it down here, I could do so. If I wanted to grab something within the composition panel, I could do so using the selection tool. Now, one thing I do want to point out is when I hover over this, if you notice that within the brackets I've got the V over next to selection tool, that's a keyboard shortcut. So as I go along, just start to pay attention to those. So like as I grab the hand tool, I notice I can also click H within my keyboard and I would grab the hand selection tool or the hand tool, which to use this, I might within the composition panel say, hey, I'm going to left click, and if I am zoomed in, so let me go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. Let's say 400. As I do that and I left click, I'm going to be able to zoom in and move around within that space. So it just helps a little bit easier instead of having to move around or unzoom and rezoom and whatnot. But I'm going to use V on the keyboard. Now I've got my selection tool, go back here, go to fit up to 100%, so I'm back to normal. The last one within that selection group is our zoom tool. And with the zoom tool, if I select that or click Z, I can use this to say, hey, I want to just zoom in on this area, and it does so. And as I did that with using that tool, notice that it did change it up here. So let me just go in maybe a little bit closer and see how notice now it's up to 200%. I'm going to go back up to fit up to 100%, go back to selection tool. So those are the first three tools within the first group. Our next group we're going to look at is our camera moves within group 2. And so we've got our rotation tool. So if I had a graphic that I wanted to rotate within 2D space right now, currently is what we're working on, I could do that with using this tool. Our next is our unified camera tool, which I can use, which we're going to look at once we get a little more advanced, especially within 3D animation. And our next one is our pan behind tool, which we're going to look at in chapter 2 when we go to move our anchor point and look at within text. So that's our second group, which is our camera moves. Our third group, which is going to be pretty much our shape tools or creation tools. So I've got our different tools right here, our rectangle tool, our pen tool, and our text tool. Now, within these tools up here, if you notice at the bottom, and I want you guys to pay attention to, they've got the little arrow in the right corner, which means this is a drop-down menu. So if I click and hold, I can bring up different options to choose within that tool or that panel. So now I'm on, notice the polygon tool, or if I want to say star tool, or if I want to go back to rectangle tool. So I can do so. Same with the pen tool, I've got different options here. So that's really quick looking at our tool panel. The next one I'm going to jump to is all the way on the right side of our composition panel, which is our preview panel. Now our preview panel, if you notice that down here in our timeline, I sit at where, if you guys could look at, it maybe not be able to show up here, but if I want to look at 1 second and 16 frames, okay, if I wanted to play through my work, maybe I wanted to jump back to the first frame, okay, could do so right up here, or to the last frame. If I want to go back to the first frame and just go a few frames in and play through. So as you notice, I can go through and kind of just select frames. I can play back and see my work. Alright, now one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select this full screen, and I'm going to play through, and it's actually been rendered through already, but as it plays, it's going to come back and play, and it's rendering a preview of my composition. Alright, so it's going to play and show what it's going to look like in real time. Now, if I wanted to maybe have this go back and forth, I could play once, or I can loop, or ping pong by going through this and selecting different ones. So this one was actually a loop. As you notice, that's ping pong going left to right, and this is just play once. Okay, and if I deselected this full screen, I could actually just show through and play what it's going to look like just within right there. So that's our preview panel. The next one I'm going to go to is our character panel. So in chapter 2, when we start to go through text, this is where we're going to really focus and look at a lot of detail, but this allows me to choose fonts, the font size, fill, stroke, and all of that with that deal with text. So we'll look at that in the next chapter. Right next to that, actually attached to this panel, is going to be our effects and presets. So this is going to be all of the effects, and as you notice, there's quite a few right here, but each one will have even more that will be able to select. And I don't expect you to know them all. I do have a couple cheat sheets within Isidore for you guys to look at. But the thing that I want you to pay attention to is each chapter we will look at a few of the effects and understanding, okay, what they do and how to control them. But you'll be able to search for them. So if I wanted to use maybe a light sweep, I could do so. Let me go ahead and find that. And there we go. Light sweep is actually one thing I used within this composition on here. So I could able, good look through and find it pretty quick just by searching for it. But there are a lot of tools or a lot of effects, and I don't expect you to know them all. But that's our effects and presets. The next one I'm going to look for or look at is our info panel. Okay, and this is attached with the project panel up in the preview. Or the preview panel is attached to the info. So go ahead and pay attention over here, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of move around within my composition panel. Notice how all this info is changing. So if I need to know something specifically about maybe this color, I notice, okay, that it's for the red channel it's 7, for the green channel 37, and for the blue 85, and alpha at 239. So it's going to kind of show a little bit of that because it is a little bit transparent. So it's going to show also where I sit on the X and Y axis. So that's our info panel. The next one I'm going to look at is our effects control. And this is attached to our project panel. So now it shows I do have that light sweep effect selected, and this is where I was making some of the changes. I can also make some of the changes within the timeline, but wanted to show you this effect controls panel and how I can actually play around and make different properties changed for that effect. So that's really looking at some of those panels. The last panel I'm going to look at is actually our menu bar or application window, where we can have our file, where you might select a new project, how to save a project, how to import, export. We'll look at some things like that later on, but this is the file, our edit, where I could undo something if I didn't like it, composition where I can start a new composition, where I'll actually render a queue to export, layer, creating new layers, effects, again, a way to get to some of those effects, animation we'll look at a next chapter, view. On window, this one I want to point out, so maybe if I didn't have a panel open that I wanted to use, so like I'm going to look at the align panel. Right now this is not selected, so it's not open, but if I wanted to select that, it would actually bring it down, and it brought it open up down within this part. So we'll look at the align panel within chapter 2, especially for text. But if I didn't see a panel that might have been closed accidentally, this is where I'd be able to find that panel and reopen it. So that is a really quick overview of all the panels plus just understanding the application itself. So that's going to conclude chapter 1 in understanding After Effects before we get into playing around. So hopefully that makes sense. If there's anything that you are unsure of, please go back and watch the videos. Take notes by printing out those cheat sheets within the lessons for chapter 1. And we are going to go into chapter 2 now.